ROCCAT Noz Gaming Headset Opinion. Since he does not have swarm, we go directly to the question of comfort and quality of the restitution. On the first point, the comfort, Noz puts forward from the first use as its particularly contained weight. It does not weigh on the top of the head, however, the foam is not very thick. In fact, on the top, it is slightly sensitive, the fabric with the mesh a little big does not have a very soft contact. There is a solution all found is to go back a little settings. This relieves a little the hoop. So far, clamping does not suffer provided you have adjusted the height hoop, ear cups. In this case, the latter is particularly good. As a result, wearing on the head is frankly good. However, if the setting is not perfect, it can move slightly. It can therefore play it a little versatile, except that the split cable will require the presence of the adapter. Which is, let's face it, a little less practical. The opening of the earpieces finalizes this aspect of comfort. There is room. The space is very sufficient. The Noz is therefore a rather comfortable headset on comfort. A firm hair on the arch, but everything else is good, very good. From the first listenings, the Noz announces the color. There is no need to procrastinate, he is enormously focused on the low line. In fact, this is not what we jumped to our ears on our first serious listening, it took time for the bass line to start. What made us think he was very focused on the treble? What is in itself is quite true, but when the bass starts, this impression disappears in favor of a bass rendering. This is what will be the most noticeable aspect of the headset, a low tone that, unfortunately, marks the entire spectrum. To be more concrete, let us present the restitution based on our DAC. At first, we placed it on the Asus Essence 1. The most obvious risk is the overflow by this very hot and alive DAC. On an equally exuberant headphones, the result may be just too much. In fact, the bass is actually particularly present. They have a depth a little too deep. They tend to opt for rendering without great relief. The mediums are rather present, but the upper part sounds a bit hollow. And the lower part a little flat. On this living DAC, it's a shame. The highs do not take the scale expected, and suffer from a low line that crushes them. In short, the helmet does not marry better with the Essence 1. In the logical sequence, we connected it to our Mini I, which is quite fresh and precise. However, the restitution remains marked by the dull tone that we evoked, but to a slightly lesser extent. The bass are present but still lack finesse. They leave the impression that, they constrain a little the rest of the spectrum. Indeed, the mediums whose presence is correct also lack precision on the lower part. The color of the helmet colors, moreover, their work with a real lack in the upper part. The treble, meanwhile, are brighter than the Essence 1 and they are good, but the whole still gives this rendering somewhat dull, not the most enjoyable. They are quite dry and slam a little on some pieces. Are brighter than the Essence 1 and they are good, but the whole still gives this rendering somewhat dull, not the most enjoyable. They are quite dry and slam a little on some pieces. Are brighter than the Essence 1 and they are good, but the whole still gives this rendering somewhat dull, not the most enjoyable. They are quite dry and slam a little on some pieces. At the video game level, the Noz pays a little the price of its strong appearance in bass. It's pretty sensitive when we go from our BT770 to Noz. The dialogues appear a little deaf, the overall tone is still a little too low to be perfectly balanced. However, the environment is not erased and the details are quite audible. However, the line is a bit forced. Thus on our test scene, if the shots are particularly dynamic and the environment is present, it is clearly at the expense of the musical soundtrack. The latter clearly goes well behind explosions and other tinting sleeves. Nevertheless, the exercise is not totally unacceptable, but undeniably, we have already had on the ears more balanced renditions. Even though, as we said, the dialogues seem a little too much, it remains nonetheless that they remain on the front of the restitution. Video game use remains in the acceptable. However, it will be necessary to accept a slightly permanent drawer, depending on the soundtrack. Explosions and other infobasses have an unfortunate tendency to pass right behind the dialogues, ultimately crushing the rest. In-game, the rendering is the same, big presence of the basses and balance finally a little way. Overall, we had more balanced and we keep this tone a little low, which clearly tones the headphones. At the microphone, the Noz offers, as often, a proper operation, even if the restitution is fairly faithful without being an example. At the level of the voice, our use will not bring any criticism, although overall a small breath is noticeable. The voice sounds slightly hoarser than it is, but overall, it's pretty clear. For €69.90, Noz will not hurt the competition. The audio quality is correct without more, there is the same price or a few euros more pleasant to listen. That said, It's lightweight, comfortable, but that's not all you expect from a helmet. Therefore, difficult to award him any reward whatsoever.